Hello, 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 and welcome to CorpusCast, the podcast all about corpus linguistics and what it can do for society. I'm your host, Dr. Robbie Love. It's weird when I'm saying it, isn't it? Isn't it strange?
That's my bit. Yeah, this does feel very strange.
Yeah. So the reason that we're doing this is that we have some news and nobody knows what I look or sound like. So I'm going to hand over to the usual host of CorpusCast. And just, can you set the scene for us, Robbie?
Well, first of all, I should say, this is Sam. This is the Sam Cook that I've mentioned in more or less every episode. Sometimes just to let you know that he has done an awful lot of work in producing the podcast for the last 3 years. Sometimes, to have a little dig at him when he's been keeping me on my toes or making me chuckle or trying to make me chuckle while we've been recording. But yes, Sam Cook, here he is in the flesh. He is a real person who's been there literally for every single episode, all 30, well, including this one, 36 episodes, which is quite a nice number.
It is.
But yes, the news that you refer to is that, well, CorpusCast has been going for 3 years, 36 episodes. We initially said we'd do 3 episodes, and we made 3 episodes 3 years ago and put them out, and then we kind of just carried on and didn't stop. And so to go from 3 months to 3 years, I think is pretty good. And the news, if it's not obvious enough already, is that we're going to put CorpusCast away for a little rest.
Hiatus, I think they call it in
showbiz. A leave of absence, a sabbatical, hiatus, whatever you want to call it. We're going to give it a little rest for a while, and you never know, maybe it'll make an occasional appearance later on. Maybe it'll return full-time later on. But 3 years, it's a nice time to give it a little rest. We're going to have a bit of a chat today, review what we've learned about corpus linguistics over the last 3 years, which is very exciting because I've learned an awful lot, and I imagine as a non-linguist, you've hopefully learned quite a lot as well, whether you wanted to or not.
A lot of it was against my will, I did.
Yeah, exactly. You've been forced to sit there and watch every single episode. So it's a bit of a funny situation here today, because you're going to be asking me some questions, and that feels very strange.
Yeah, welcome to Robbie's one-to-one. We thought we'd record
my performance review. Yeah.
We'll put a poll attached to this episode, and then you can vote on how well he did over the last 3 years. Robbie, let's start at the beginning, because I think you got in touch, obviously, over 3. Well, it must have probably been 3 and a bit.
It would have been over 3 years ago now, because
2021, I think.
Yeah, that's right, because we obviously had been talking about it for a while before we ended up recording the first episode, which was with Paul Baker from Lancaster University. Yeah. And then it was another 2 or 3 months before that episode actually came out. So it's kind of approaching 3.5 years, actually, since we first chatted about this. Do you remember how did...
I remember, I remember
it. This begin?
Clearest. You said, Sam, I really want to start a podcast. I'm not sure what to do it in. Corpus linguistics is quite niche. And I was like, that's perfect, because if you came to me and said, I want to do a Man United podcast, they're 10 a penny. Corpus linguistics, A, what is it? And B, how much time have you got on your hands? And I think we got along well, and you had some great ideas, and obviously put it into practice. I said, what do you think we should call it? And I think that's probably what we spent the longest amount of time on. And I know that you hated CorpusCast in the beginning. You were just like, I just don't. You're like, can it be like love on language? Can it be what was it? Oh, I was like, I'm trying to think else what you said now, but love on language always sticks in the back of my mind. And I said, look, just trust me, and let's go with CorpusCast. Now you've had 3 years for it to bed in, and it's easy to get used to it. Are you used to it now?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, I got used to it very quickly. I do remember we talked quite a lot about the name, and you're right. I didn't like CorpusCast. I to be honest, I can't remember why I didn't like it. But I always felt a little bit uneasy about CorpusCast with Robbie Love, sort of thing, because I thought, well, this is about everyone apart from me. Because as you're probably about to discover, I don't have that much to say myself. about these things. It's much easier for me to ask other people what they think and respond to what they say. But yeah, I'm not sure why. I just thought, oh, is it too obvious in a way? But then I suppose the most obvious name is ideally what you're going to go for. I also wasn't sure about, sort of appointing myself the responsibility of being the Corpus Linguists podcast person in case I did a really terrible job.
You don't want to take any responsibility.
And then nobody else could take that name, It's actually, I think, a really good name now, I realize. And I thought, well, if we do 3 episodes and then it's terrible and we don't want to do any more, then that name's gone for other people potentially.
You ruined it.
Yeah. So that, but actually, yes, I'm very used to it, and I think it's worked quite well. Yeah, I think it's for the people who listen to it, and it's developed I suppose a bit of recognition, and it's nice and short and memorable, and it allows me to remind people of my Northern English accent, because I won't say CorpusCast,
Right.
say CorpusCast, and take quite a lot of pleasure in.
Well, look, I'm on your side there, but I had no idea that you were from Newcastle. I thought you were Welsh. For the longest time, I thought you were Welsh. I was like, there's a something in there, and it sounds like there's a twang.
Yeah,
something.
Yeah, I shouldn't use this word, but I've often been accused of being not just Welsh actually, but American, Australian, Canadian. People have variously ascribed me different nationalities based on my accent. My accent has actually changed quite a lot, which is not that unusual, as linguists who listen to this will know. But yes, I did grow up near Newcastle, and growing up, I did have a stronger, what you might call, Geordie accent.
And you say Newcastle, and it should be Newcastle, shouldn't it? Is that not?
Oh, what did I say?
Newcastle.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it be Newcastle?
No.
Am I being pedantic?
No.
I will be pedantic because I'm sat opposite you.
That's just wrong. No. That's just wrong. No, the stress is on the first Newcastle. It's not Newcastle.
I thought it was Newcastle.
No. It's Newcastle.
Is it?
Yeah.
See, I'd always said that, and I've been corrected. Should we ring that person now? No, I won't do that.
It's Ant and Deck.
And thank you, Ant or Deck.
Yeah. Ant or Deck.
How long have you been in Birmingham for?
Well, I moved to Birmingham when I got my job here at Aston.
Yeah.
I joined Aston at the beginning of 2020, less than a month before the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So nearly 5 years I've been living in Birmingham.
But you're not Robbie yet, though, are you?
I'm not.
You're not Robbie.
No. Well, I mean, people have called me that, but no. It's fun. Yeah, that's my accent hasn't changed more recently. I've certainly not become more Brummy. I don't think. No, that would be a bad thing, of course. Lots of respect here in the room for the good people of Birmingham. But no, I don't think it's changed that much in recent years. But coming here, just before the pandemic was an interesting experience. The first sort of year and a half of working at Aston was entirely remote. And it was about the time that we started talking about the podcast that we were sort of returning to some semblance of normality in terms of actually getting to come and teach on the campus again, which I hadn't really had a chance to do when I joined for the first year and a half. It was all just me sitting at home in my office. Much like most of the CorpusCast episodes continued to be, actually, teaching online. But funnily enough, and I don't think many of my colleagues here know this, actually, but I actually worked technically, I didn't work for Aston, but I did work at Aston several years before I joined, over 10 years ago now, actually. In my final year of my undergraduate degree, when I was studying at Lancaster, each summer, as a sort of summer job, I was working for this company called iQuest, International Quest. And it was one of these English language summer school, summer camp type experiences for largely Italian teenagers from schools would come over in groups with their teachers and live on a university campus in the UK for a few weeks in the summer. And I was, in the third and final year that I did it, I was assigned to work at Aston as an activity manager. So I didn't have any academic work. I wasn't teaching them English. Ironically, I had nothing to do with what they were learning, but I was organizing their discos in the old student union building.
So where you got that shirt from? I mean, those watching the podcast will appreciate that. Those listening, think of your grandma's curtains, and you're so close to what we've. Where'd you get that from?
Hey, this is actually a brand new shirt. It was delivered.
No,
you won't believe this. It was delivered to my house about 3 hours ago.
Oh,
this morning. I regret saying that now. I should have said, "Oh, this old thing. I've had it for years." This is actually a new shirt that I chose.
I saw it
because I liked it.
Passed down through generations of loves.
Well, it will be. It will be. There will be loves of the future who will be forced to wear this thing. Is this your way of telling me you don't think it looks very good?
I wouldn't get away with it. You certainly do. Right. Let's start at the very, very beginning.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, what inspired you to start all of this in the first place?
Well, we'd done a little bit of work together earlier in 2021 when I published a paper about swearing, and it was picked up a bit by the press, and I did a few interviews, including an interview with Victoria Derbyshire on BBC. And I think, based on the feedback that you and members of your team in press and communications gave me, I think you sensed that I was relatively comfortable talking about what I do for my research, talking about linguistics, corpus linguistics, whatever, in front of, a live microphone or camera or whatever.
A live studio audience is there really great.
Right. And so, you'd said some nice things, sort of encouraging me, maybe boosted my ego a little bit. Maybe, okay, maybe if they like me, maybe we can come up with a way of doing something more. And I know that around the same time, you were launching the Aston Originals platform as well, which is, well, you can say much more about than I can, but from my impression, it's sort of a one-stop shop for Aston University's digital video and audio content. Mm-hmm. And you had already done a couple of other series, short series of videos and podcasts. And so I thought, maybe we could do something to contribute to launching Aston Originals. And so obviously, podcasts, everyone's got a podcast these days, it seems. And I looked around and realized, there's not a podcast about corpus linguistics. There are lots of brilliant language and linguistics podcasts more broadly, but there wasn't anything specifically about corpus linguistics. And I thought, well, why not give it a go? I know that there's, a big community in the corpus linguistics research community around the world. There's lots of people. It's, as we've discovered in all of our conversations,
spoken to a lot of them, yeah.
Most of them, actually. That's one of the reasons we're stopping. We've run out. No, that's absolutely not true. I've said this already. We could have carried on like in our entire lives and not gotten around, 10% of the people who could have come on the show. But I thought, well, the field is growing and it's diversifying. This is one of the most obvious, takeaways, I think, from if you put all the episodes together. Obviously, I was picking people specifically based on either what they were doing or just trying to get a diversity of topics and applications. But that's kind of one of the main things that people will tell you over and over again, that in the last 10, 20 years, whatever, corpus linguistics has diversified an awful lot. And so I thought, well, this is, there are people all over the place, and lots of students as well, who, they're asked to read people's dusty old monographs and journal articles and things. And, you obviously get to know a sense of who the people are behind the research, but you don't necessarily get to see them talking a bit more candidly about what they do. Even if you go to a conference and you see someone give a talk about their research, you'll get a sense of who they are more readily than if you read one of their papers. But still, it's constrained by, the conventions of the format. And so I thought an interview series with corpus linguists where, yes, it's scripted to the extent that we prepare questions and I give them the questions in advance so they know what they're going to be asked. But I try to instruct them to speak freely, as I'm attempting to do right now, and it is actually very hard, as I'm discovering. Got a great much more, a great deal of admiration for all the guests who've come on. Might be of interest. And so that's sort of where it came from. I never had any interest in doing something, which is more of a traditional podcast format where you're essentially making audio documentaries. I mean, I had an interest in doing that, but I knew I wouldn't have the time because that is so much more time consuming. If I had to script something and it was essentially me sitting for an hour talking through a case or something, I knew I wouldn't have the time. So an interview format is more efficient, I guess, in terms of my time as well.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it was almost at the time, it was a radio show essentially, a talk radio show. But the thing that surprised me the most is just how far podcasting has moved in the last 3 years alone. I went to a conference to the podcast show in May this year, and it was just incredible just to see how far along it had moved from, these people that had started off in their bedroom and whatever, or radio stations were calling it a podcast when it was essentially clipped up shows. And, the amount of work that does go into these big productions, they have whole crews. I mean, the Diary of a CEO was there, which reminds me, I want to start one called Dairy of a Cow, just so when it's on my little placard, I look famous for a little bit until I get close enough to see this. So, but it doesn't matter. He was they were all there, and they had talks throughout the 2 days, and they had his head of trails there. So, he has a whole team working on what is essentially a cinematic advert for that podcast. And you just see how these teams get so big because you have all of these creative people in there. It's brilliant. And let's have a look at the guests and the episodes. Which episodes or moments stand out as particularly memorable for you?
Oh my goodness, I don't know where to begin. I mean, if we go back to the first episodes we did 3 years ago, which were basically a little trial, we'll record 3 episodes and put them out and just see what happens. And I'm very grateful, to Paul Baker, Eleanor Semino, and Pascual Paredes, who were the first 3 guests, because there was nothing for me to show them, to say here's something we've already been doing for a while. As time went on, it got easier to find guests because I could say, well, we've had 10 episodes out now, and look at the people who've already been on. Would you like to do it as well? But I was just going to them cold.
Calling in favors, I suppose. And
yeah, in a way, yeah. Actually, yes. Yeah, calling in favor, just sort of saying, this is something completely new. Can I ask you to just talk to me online for an hour or so? And maybe nothing will happen. They might not even go out, but do you mind? And what I was very grateful for was that they all just enthusiastically agreed to do it. And they were very happy to just let me try something. And they were all, they were really interesting, and it set us off on a really good, a really good path, and sort of helped us make quite an easy decision in the end to carry on. I think from the first year, one of the highlights for me was probably the episode that was closest to my original vision, if you will, for CorpusCast, because I'm really happy with how it's gone, but it's not gone exactly as I imagined it, just because I realized very quickly that the way I originally wanted to do it was going to be very challenging. The idea originally was for each episode to have 2 guests. Not that we did it in the first 3, so it sounds a bit, but I promise you it was. I at least asked them if they would do this as well, and they couldn't, and that was what made me realize it wasn't going to work as well. But, the idea was to have an academic, a corpus linguist, and somebody that they've worked with from outside of academia, an external stakeholder of some kind, whether it was from government or from a charity or from any business that they've worked with or whatever, from any sort of organization or whatever outside of academia. And it was really going to be focused sort of strongly on the applied aspect of corpus linguistics. And we've kept that
theory and practice.
Yeah. I mean, we've kept that, I've really tried to tease out applications and not spend too long getting, I don't want to say bogged down because it's actually really interesting, but the theoretical and methodological stuff is there's been more of that than I thought there would be initially. But it proved, quite difficult to find, for asking the academics to then find somebody who would be available. And also there's a lot of turnover in organizations in general. And so it might be even you worked with somebody a year ago on a project and then you go back to them and they've moved to another company or something. And so I realized very quickly this was going to be quite hard, but we more or less managed that model for one episode, which was the aviation communication episode.
Eric Frignell and
where we had 3 guests. Yeah, we had Eric Frignell, Malila Prado, and Andrew Schneider. And that was, I really, really enjoyed that. That was really fun because it was properly kind of connecting, the dots between the corpus linguistics stuff and what people are doing with it in industry. But logistically, it was a nightmare because
you couldn't have picked a more difficult.
The time zones were just awful.
Yeah, time zones alone.
And then you're asking somebody to get up at, I think it was Eric. Eric was in Seattle or something at the time, and so he had to get up like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. or something. And but I mean, they did it. That's the thing. They did it nonetheless, which is why I'm so grateful. I've mentioned it in passing, but we don't pay the guests. We never have. We don't have the budget for that.
No, not after we paid your fee. No.
There's nothing. Nothing left? No, indeed. Yes. The monthly bag of peanuts you send me. That's all. That's all we've got. All we got budget for. But they did it, and we it took a while, but we managed to find a slot where we could all get together. 5 people, 4 different time zones. Because one was West Coast states, one was East Coast states, and we were in the UK, and then I think Malila was in China. Yeah. And so it was just, oh my goodness. But we managed it, and that was really, really fun. But for all of the episodes to be kind of like that, I realized very quickly it wasn't going to work. And so we then sort of switched to more of a traditional, most of the episodes after that have been one-to-one interviews, which are easier to organize, obviously, and also easier to manage while we're making the recording as well. Yeah. Because if you've got 2 or 3 guests, I did struggle sometimes with ensuring that everybody gets, an opportunity to say their bit and contribute, and without it being redundant, because what you don't want to do is ask the same question twice to both guests and they're both kind of repeating, the same thing. So it's then, well, what do I ask to them? What do I ask to them? But I think we managed. But yeah, that was an early, that was a really fun one. But there've been so many. I mean, yeah.
You've done 2 now. Well, this is the 3rd one in person. So weirdly, the first one was...
I think 3. I think we did 3.
3 in person.
Yeah.
So was it Michaela?
Yeah, we had Michaela Malberg.
So she's from Sydney.
No, Monica McNorrick is from Sydney. So Michaela was at the time based at the University of Birmingham. Yeah. She's since moved to Germany, but she was in Birmingham at the time. So that was an obvious one. I wanted to have her on anyway, and she was local. And so let's bring in the studio. Monica is, based at Sydney. And I want to mention Monica, actually, because she supported us in the first year as well. Through her Sydney Corpus lab, producing transcripts of the quick questions section of the first year of episodes. And that was really nice sort of to have as a bit of a resource, and also just a bit more of a recognition of what we're doing. But yeah, Monica is based at the University of Sydney, other side of the world, obviously.
Yes.
But happened to be visiting Birmingham. And so I kind of just grabbed her. While you're here, pop over to Aston and sit in this room. Yeah. Sit on the awful
red sofa. Oh God, awful.
Yeah, really uncomfortable as well. But
there was one episode. I wasn't going to ask you which episode wasn't your favorite, like was the worst episode. But I'm going to ask only because.
Don't ask that.
No, but I know it won't be because of the guest.
No,
it's not because of the guest. It's because you had decided to go to a conference in Australia. And essentially, so Robbie's been on a flight for what I imagine is well over 24 hours. I mean, how long did it take you to get there that time?
Yeah, it was. It's only a solid day.
It got to the hotel room. Must have been midnight where you were, whatever time, maybe lunchtime. So you'd inconvenienced me slightly by us lunchtime. And you said, "Oh, why have I done this? Why have I decided to do it?" So what did go through? Did you think, "Oh, I'll just fly to Australia. I'll hop off," and then from the hotel room with the curtains drawn, I'll sit.
Honestly, I don't know. So that was also in the first year. That was with Stephanie Avert.
Yeah.
And I think we'd struggled to find a time when we were both available anyway. And I can't remember, but we may have been under a little bit of pressure to get the next episode recorded because it had to come out quite soon. And I don't know what possessed me, but it was literally landed in Melbourne, got to the hotel, and about 20 minutes later, we started the call. So I'd literally just had a shower and put on a shirt. Well, not just a shirt. I was fully clothed. I mean,
to caveat that.
Well,
I had to say this. I was fully clothed.
I guess what I meant was that I wasn't wearing a shirt like this on the flight.
No,
I got changed into a more of a smart outfit. Yeah, exactly. Who would wear a shirt like this in any context, let alone just on the flight? I know that's what you were thinking. Wow, this is such a different episode to all the other ones.
Yeah,
I almost prefer this. No, I shouldn't say it. And then but I mean, I don't know. I mean, that was a bad decision on my part. No, I mean, Stephanie was great, and it came out well, and it was a nice conversation. But we could have waited another week maybe. And I wasn't on my, I was exhausted. Yeah, obviously, and
yes,
but that was
that you learned a lesson.
Yeah, I learned the lesson. Yeah, I think that's the only one that we recorded not, either from home or from the campus, And there's a reason why it's the only one, because it was not so easy. But yeah, you live and you learn, and it was fine. It went well. Stephanie was great. It was a nice episode, but yeah, I regretted that decision.
Yeah, that was very telling. Was there a guest that you had on and you didn't know how it was going to go, and it surprised you in the way that it turned out, or it went down an avenue that you maybe didn't expect it to go down?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the most skipping to sort of more recent times, the most recent episode we did, with Stefan Grease, I had no idea how it was going to go. I only plucked it. I shouldn't. Not expecting he might end up listening to this, but I didn't think he would necessarily agree to do it, because I got the impression that it wasn't the sort of thing that he liked to do necessarily too often, and I don't know him very well. We sort of bumped into each other at a few conferences over the last few years. We only got to properly talk to each other at a conference earlier this year. We were both at a conference in Kuwait, of all places. That's where we actually sort of talked and got to know each other a bit. And it was after that conference there that I thought, oh, actually, we've made more of a personal connection now.
Yeah.
I'd at least feel comfortable emailing and ask him, and then I'm not coming out of the blue as a stranger. And he just was totally up for it and agreed and was very enthusiastic about it. And then we came to record it, and he was wearing a dressing gown, which was, I mean, fine. It was a first for the series, which was wonderful. And actually, he was one of the more candid guests, I think, which is what I really loved about it.
Definitely.
Because obviously, and this is absolutely understandable. People don't necessarily want to take risks reputationally by saying something too personal or whatever, and they're sort of there to do a serious job, and they're representing themselves professionally. So obviously the vast majority of the conversations have been very, intellectually stimulating and focused on the topic, and I've certainly not wanted to ask, anything personal or too probing. But he just seemed to be very open to just saying what he thought about things. And so I was a little bit more, and maybe because I'd done so many episodes by then, I felt more comfortable asking him nothing silly, but, slightly more risky questions, in the sense of, what do you think about the quality of this research? It's not a question I'd really asked anyone else before, but we kind of got onto that. And it was, I don't want to say it was unexpectedly good, but in a way it was, I hoped and thought it would be good, but it was even better than I thought it would, because he was just so open and willing to just say what he thought, and I think that's the best kind of conversation, where you really get a sense of who the person is and what and their story. Increasingly in the last sort of year or so, I've been spending more time at the beginning, asking them about their own personal journey, their academic background, and how did they get into corpus linguistics, and where did they study, and what did they do, and what I learned was, in a way reassuring, is that the pattern I noticed, it wasn't with everyone, but with a lot of the guests, was there was an element of serendipity and a kind of, I had a chance meeting with somebody and they just mentioned, oh, maybe you should talk to that person and study, nobody seemed to kind of plan, this is my plan. And then it was all just, I just happened to fall into it. And then, and in a way, I think that's reassuring, certainly for me, and would have been reassuring, while I was still studying. And I hope it's reassuring for students, in that, the people that you look as being, top level research. And I'm very lucky that I had the chance to speak with some of the sort of prominent, most currently sort of most influential and successful, however you measure that, researchers in the field, that they were also in that same position themselves. It's not like they came out of the womb, writing grant applications, and winning millions of pounds at their university, obviously. But you know what I mean? It was reassuring to me that I didn't have a sense of, what have I done wrong? Or what did I not do that I was supposed to do? So yeah, I mean, it's that episode was if that is the last proper episode, with an academic guest, then it's a pretty good way to go out, because it was very unexpected.
Definitely. I work with a lot of academics, and you have a lot of those sort of content creation conversations and stuff. And, like you say, it was really good for somebody to just be themselves and not worry about what they're having to say, or having to caveat everything with, I don't want to offend anyone, but, just straight talking, to the point, fantastic listening. So what is next for you? Because I'd love to carry on working with you, and I know that you're going to be busy over the next however long, because you didn't come out the womb writing grant applications, unfortunately. So what's next for you now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I really wanted to. I didn't necessarily want to stop doing this. The idea. I mean, we've talked repeatedly over the last 3 years. How is it go? Is it worth us carrying on? Or is anyone actually listening or watching? And you keep telling me yes, yes. For what it is, which is a very niche thing. I mean, we were never aiming to be, my dad wrote a porno or something. That's one of my favorite podcasts. Glad to clarify
is that where that shit's from?
That isn't what we were aiming for. Although, if we'd gone down that line, we may have had many more listeners. But it was never meant to be that. Obviously, it's a very niche thing. It's an academic thing, and undoubtedly, most people who've been following along and watching and listening to the episodes are, students and researchers in the field of corpus linguistics, and that it was never meant to be anything, beyond that. So obviously, the numbers are, reflective of the scope of what it is. But in terms of sort of moving forward, things change. Obviously, Aston University is changing strategically as well. And I think it's the right time for me to spend a little bit more time doing some other things, such that, there's only so many times I can ask a corpus linguist, how do you think things are going to, change over the next 10, 20, 50 years? And every single response that we received to that sort of question was fascinating. But I feel like after 3 years, we've got a pretty good sense of kind of where the field is at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think if you let it take a little rest and then potentially come back after a little gap, enough of it, an opportunity for things to maybe moved on to whatever the next phase of the development of the field is, then there'll be more, it'll refresh it a bit, and there'll be more new, different things to talk about. What I think is wonderful about the 3-year period that we did this podcast for was that it captured precisely the period of time that AI appeared.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't appear, but generative AI,
as we know,
GPT, things like that.
Yeah.
The whole first year was kind of pre-ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And so, if you, as I've been talking about actually with one of our former guests about making a corpus of CorpusCasts.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, we definitely want to do that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I've been chatting with one of the former guests who's we both sort of realized we were both thinking about doing something similar, and sort of we're hoping at some point soon we'll be able to work together and put that together. A little bit self-indulgent.
No, not at all. No, but really interesting.
But that would be, it's a nice sort of record. As I think it was Dan McIntyre, who was a previous guest, said recently on Twitter or X, that it's a kind of a living record of corpus linguistics. So I think that's a really nice thing for him to say. But in a way, yes, we've got 3 years of all these different conversations, and it captures a really huge sort of monumental time, not only in corpus linguistics or applied linguistics, but in research and society more broadly, with all of these disciplines at the same time going, what do we do about generative AI? What can it do for us? What are the limitations? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? And tracking the emergence of that, that topic has probably kind of gone like that in terms of how often it's come up as the conversations have gone on, which is really nice. You get a little snapshot of what things were like before it was really on.
One of Jay Greaves' little graphs that's sort of the diamond shape.
Yeah,
but
exactly. So, that's one reason. Another reason is very practical, just in terms of my time and your time as well. It has only been one episode a month, but nonetheless, there is, a certain amount of time and work that goes into keeping up with that schedule and not wanting to kind of end up just missing one, and then not being so reliable. So I'd rather kind of, 3 years kind of clean cut. I can spend a bit more time doing some other things for a while. And maybe we'll, look at developing something else, potentially a different format or something. The good news is that, Aston University, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. I'm not involved, which is why I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. But I think I can at least say that I know that another linguistics-related podcast is in the works from Aston. I probably shouldn't say anything beyond that, as I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not. But I know that there is something else coming in some capacity from Aston related to language and linguistics. And so that also reassures me about making this decision, in that, there'll be something else to take over the space in some way anyway, which is nice.
Yeah. No, keep your eyes peeled for that. I think it's going to be great. We're hoping for probably a quarter of the way through next year is penciled in, very lightly penciled in.
Yes.
Actually, they'll be in here on the 18th of December, I think. For they will be on.
They will be. Well, it won't be me talking about. I can tell you that they does not include. It's not me. So
I don't know if we'll talk about the same thing now.
Well, actually, that's it. Yeah, we'll find out when we finish recording whether we are talking about the same thing or not.
Yeah. Oh, incredible! What I was going to say on the corpus of CorpusCast, I ran some very quick numbers on the amount of time that you have talked in these episodes, and I put it between 6 and 9%. Do you find that surprising?
Yes, actually, that's less.
A lot less than you thought.
Yeah, I'm very self-conscious, or I remember feeling very self-conscious, and a lot of the recordings think, oh, my question is just really long. I'm not really asking a question anymore. I'm talking, but fortunately, the answers were always longer, which
to academics, or what did you expect?
Which yeah, exactly.
Talking forever.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad, because it was never meant. Yes, you've forced me to put my face on. Oh, it's
gone. It's gone off. Yeah,
I did that. I pressed the button down here. My face in sort of CorpusCast with Dr. Robbie Love and all that, and it took me that was more than the name. That was the thing that took a bit getting used to, because I didn't want people to think it was just, me talking about me.
Yeah.
But it was me talking to lots of other people, and it's about them and what they're doing, and I happen to be somebody who
You're the vehicle for theirs.
silly enough to volunteer to be the facilitator of them being able to share what they're doing. So I'm glad that it's not more than that, 6 or 9%, because it should be that most of it is them talking about what they're doing.
Now, if you were a betting man, which you clearly are, and they've lost one, hence the shirt. If you had to bet on how many words there were in the corpus of CorpusCast, what would your bet be? I mean, the average episode is between 45 minutes and an hour. There's 36 of them with this one. What would your guess be? Just if it does happen, it'd be nice to come back to this and see.
I would say we are in 6 digits, probably, but not. It's hard to say because there are estimates around this sort of thing, but I would say somewhere in the low 100,000.
Really?
Potentially.
I don't really know, but you mean if someone says that to me, I've got a real point of reference of what that looks like.
It might be. It may well be below. It may well be below 100,000.
Really? That's surprising. That'd be really interesting, actually.
I'll have. Yeah. I will have a look. I don't think it won't be in the millions because it's an hour of a conversation is relatively short, and there's 36 of them, which compared to other sort of spoken corporate, that's relatively small. So I would say probably maybe 100,000-200,000 tokens, maybe. I mean, I might be completely wrong because maybe I talk a lot quicker. So obviously, the quicker you talk, the more words you can cram into the time, right? So it may well be a lot more than that, or maybe less. But that would be my very rough guess. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of other projects, the one I keep saying about wanting to do with you, and then you keep going, no, we'll have a look at that, and then nothing ever happens. Is about swearing, because I was like, we need to do a podcast called "I Swear It's True," because what I've come up with is a name for the podcast, and I thought we'd work backwards.
Yeah, that's clearly what that's how meant to work.
How everything works.
Yeah,
you come up with a name, and then you go, how can I fit a business into this name?
Yeah,
I'm sure that's what people do.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly, I mean, you'd know more than I. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be fun to do something around swearing. I think that would have to be a very different format, which is why I've always been like, yes, that sounds great, but because my instinct tells me that will be more time consuming, because I think that would need to be more your sort of radio documentary style type of thing, which invariably would be more time. I would love to. I would absolutely love to at some point do something around that. But it's just time. It's sort of, I'm being pulled in quite a lot of directions at the moment, put it that way. And making some hard decisions about time and what to spend time on. And yeah, I mean, maybe things might change soon enough or whatever, and we could. It would be really nice to do something like that, and hopefully, something really fun. Because there's a lot there. I think that society is at a bit of a crossroads, really, almost with swearing, because on the one hand, you've got all of this research saying that most people, don't really. I shouldn't say most people, but swearing is common, very common, even in professional contexts, and often doesn't offend people. And then you've, at the same time, got all of these, regulations and policies, whether it's in school or other contexts where sort of you're not allowed to swear, don't swear, and I'm not going to sit here and say, everybody should just swear all the time, because why, that's clearly not the solution if you perceive that to be a problem. But I do worry about there being a bit of a mismatch in a way between people who use certain language or certain words in ways that are within their group completely not offensive. Yeah. And then maybe a mismatch between perceptions of the strength of swearing with people from outside of that group, judging them, thinking that they're deliberately antagonizing by choosing to use words that they, thinking they're trying to offend people by using those words as opposed to that's just a normal word for them. So yeah, there'd be some really fun, interesting things to look at there, I think. But also, swearing is a sexy topic, right? There's already an awful lot out there. A lot of popular nonfiction books, the kind of books you buy at Waterstones for Christmas, or an academic eventually sort of, or maybe not even an academic, journalists or whoever would do their research and put out a book around the F word or something, and something fun for the coffee table. There's a lot of that stuff already. And so, it would be about finding, is there something new, to say about these things?
I think it's really, it's the interesting point you made there is the different context of it. And obviously I came from radio, and whenever you mention TV and radio, one's got a watershed and one hasn't for some reason. And that's always confused me as to why, if it's TV, you can swear after the watershed, but radio, you're just absolutely nothing. You have the dump button throughout 24 hours a day if someone says something they're not supposed to or swears, essentially. Does that surprise you? Do you think that will change over time?
Well, I think you are seeing less sort of penalization of this sort of thing. And I think broadcasters, they from my perspective, they appear to go too far to apologize if, say, during the afternoon,
almost point it out.
Yeah, they draw attention to it by making a bit, we're terribly sorry about the language that you just heard in that interview. The guest was asked not to swear, but they said to swear. Well, they sort of really, because they're trying to cover their backs and
Sure.
sort of mitigate against complaints, and then they get referred to Ofcom for an investigation. So I get it, but it feels really performative, and it increasingly feels completely out of line with, just common sense or day-to-day experience, where in what other context would if somebody accidentally or just without thinking, said the F word or something, would you need to, oh my God, everybody stop. Everybody stop what you're doing. We must formally and sincerely apologize for the use of language. And if you're offended by the use of language, we're very, very sorry. And think, I'm not sure if this is really necessary. I'm not sure who is offended, if anyone, by that, rather than the, people who say they're offended by, and I'm not talking, obviously there is a lot of ways of seriously offending people with language. I'm not talking about, I'm talking about the innocuous way.
What's the best one?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Is your professional opinion?
I'm not going to answer that question. But I'm talking about, somebody sitting, on a daytime sort of TV chat show being interviewed about their latest book or something, and they drop an F word in there while they're chatting just for emphasis. So I'm not talking about, obviously, people trying to, abuse people.
I think a really good example is Miriam.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking of her. Yeah. I'm picturing her in my mind.
Margles.
Yeah, Margles. Yeah. And she, her resistance to it is that she's just completely unapologetic.
Yeah.
And she's done it so many times, and yet she still gets invited on.
Sure.
If it was actually a serious problem, then if the first time she swore live on radio or TV, she'd have never been
Take your pick,
invited back,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
But she's still, and everyone, well, a lot of people love her, and so there's, I think some things could perhaps be updated a bit so that we don't sort of give the impression that something really serious has happened when let's just take a pause and look at what's actually happened. Is it really actually that serious? I'm not sure. Yeah. But as I said, swearing is, there's an awful lot out there. And so, maybe one day we could do something, but we'd need to find an angle. Maybe if anyone has any ideas, anyone has any ideas or of formats or then sure. But
to love a mob on X is the handle. Get in touch with Robbie and say do something sweary with Sam. We'll make it happen. Right, look, before we wrap up here, I just want to ask you, obviously, the question that you ask your guests at the end of every episode. And I know you sort of said during this episode that you've heard all the answers you could possibly hear. But I think advice is really, really important, and bringing in that next generation of corpus linguists who aren't necessarily, coming out of university now, but are maybe in something else actually, and going to come into this field by accident, like a lot of the guests that have been on this podcast have done. So what would your advice be for anybody getting into corpus linguistics?
Well, I think the thing that I say to my own students most often is, well, two things really. One is take your time, or take the time to, get used to playing with data, especially if this is very unfamiliar, working with data in this way. It's not something, don't be impatient, I suppose is what I'm saying. It's not something you're necessarily going to, be able to do overnight.
Yeah.
Because what I've found in terms of my own learning, I'm still learning. I think everybody would say they're still learning, but that even though there's, the field has kind of congregated around a certain set of core, methodological approaches that are the kind of things that are likely to be taught, in Corpus Linguistics 101, keenness analysis, collocation analysis, reading, concordance lines, the sort of bread and butter, if you will, of what we do. Even those things, these are still developing. There are still researchers innovating, and we've seen some examples of this on the show in terms of methodological innovations and disagreements among the fields. So I would say, take the time to immerse yourself, if you will, in playing with these methods and getting your head around why you might observe a certain finding that might contradict what you assume. It's not as simple as just searching for a word and going, oh, it happens that many times, because what a lot of people don't think about so much are the methodological assumptions that are going on underneath. And what I've learned, I think one of the main things I've learned is that the methodology that you apply in building a corpus, or indeed if you're using a corpus that somebody else has built, the decisions that you or they have made in building the corpus can be entirely, partially or entirely influential on what you're going to find.
And confirmation bias almost.
Well, yeah, and this is nothing new. I mean, people have been writing about these issues around sampling and representativeness and all the sorts of things we've discussed on the show, for a very long time. But nonetheless, the more and more, and I've made this point in a few talks over the last year or so, the more and more that corpus linguistics becomes democratized, and more people are accessing it and learning about it, and it's being applied more broadly, and you get more and more corpora that are being released and made available, and tools are getting more user-friendly and easier to access and bigger and better and more powerful, blah, 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 blah. More and more automation. You're seeing AI starting to be integrated into corpus tools. The more detached you become from, well, what is the data I'm working with? Where's it from? How was it sampled? Where was it? And those things, if we forget about those things, then you can search for something and go, oh my God, I've discovered something about language, and maybe you haven't, or maybe you have, but you what you found in your data is actually something different because of the design of the data set. So I'd say don't rush, and the other thing I'd say is read more than you probably think you should, examples of what other people are doing, in the research community, particularly if you're studying and you're having to prepare, your own bit of research and write up a report yourself. It's linked to the first point about being patient and taking your time, because I think impatience, and I get like this sometimes, I just want to skip to the chase and, I've come up with an idea and let's do it. Well, take the time to, be inspired and learn from what others around you have done, and have an open mind. And I'm giving a lot of different things here, which is mostly summarizing.
Quick question, apparently, that was, it's very difficult to keep the answers quick. Do you know what I'm going to have? In the video, I'm going to have the moon coming up and then the sun going down, and then talking a couple of times.
And then it'll be 24 hours. And another thing is that,
and one more thing,
and then you're in your 90,
yeah,
with your dressing gown,
with
Stefan's dressing gown.
It was the pre-show with Stefan.
And hot water bottle, and and another thing I would say, blah 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 blah. These are things that probably other guests have said, but I
learn Python.
I wouldn't. say that's strictly necessary, but I know others may disagree with that point, as I've discovered.
I did. Perfect. Well, Robbie, it's been really interesting to catch up like this, and I think it's a really good opportunity to sort of round it off so nobody just thinks we disappeared and we've taken all the episodes and put them in the recycling or something, and then they've gone off to be incinerated, as does happen.
No, that's what's happening to me.
Yes,
Ian, and that's fine.
That shit does look flammable. Oh my God. What I would think like to just finish on would be, you thank the guests that have been on. Would you like to thank your listeners who have mostly actually been guests as well at some point? Yeah. But if you'd just like to finish up by thanking.
No, I absolutely. I'm very, very grateful for everybody who's been listening and watching this. And of course, among those, the people who have been brave enough to be a guest, is it's not easy, no. And some people find it really, really hard, and yet they've done it anyway. And hopefully they've even, I think most of the guests at least have even enjoyed it as well. And that's something I'm proud of. I'm proud of, the guests volunteering their time, which is, I haven't got a percentage, but I'd say it's over 95% of the people I've asked to do it have said yes, and they've done it. And that's wonderful. But yeah, obviously without anyone listening to it or watching it, and without any guests, then it would just be me a bit like this, sitting, maybe we can tolerate one episode of this, but
I could be brilliant for one episode.
I think that's about it, No, I'm very, very grateful. Yeah. Thank you to everybody who's listened and watched and supported. It's, it's great that when I've been to conferences over the last couple of years, there's always been, one or two or several people, who've come up to me, people I don't know, and said, "Oh, you're Robbie. I just wanted to say, I recognize you from your bedroom office and your home, with my wrestling belts above my head or whatever, or my cat or something." I said, "Oh, really enjoying CorpusCast. I've been assigning it to my students, or whatever." And there are, like Larissa Goulart at university in the United States, Mont St. Clair University. I knew I could remember the name. She created learning resources from CorpusCast and assigned it to her students on the corpus linguistics module that she teaches. This is wonderful. This is all the evidence that I could ever want that there are people out there, in this very kind of asynchronous format where you can't get live feedback from whoever's listening. That people value it and have appreciated it. And, there are far more important things in the world. I hope that hope you forgive me if anyone is deeply disappointed that we're going to be going away for a little bit. But I hope nonetheless that, the episodes we have, the 35, I won't include this one really, but the 35 episodes.
35 in the Christmas special.
Yeah. Do have a value that will last for some time. Definitely. So, yeah, I'm very grateful. And I'm very grateful to you, of course, as well, because there's no way I would have done this on my own. And you are a non-linguist, and you've sat there. You're potentially the only person who's listened to every single episode. If there are others, then let us know. That's a wonderful record. Maybe we'll make you a certificate or something. But, you've been there for every single one, and you've been very supportive. To me as well, and I'm very grateful for that.
It's been very fun. Yeah, I don't know, it really has been a pleasure. And I don't know if we're building up to the moment where, on Wolf of Wall Street, where he's like, "I'm not leaving." It seems like you're going to that, but that's maybe not the case. But if you want Robbie to carry on, do make sure you let him know. We'll leave his email address of his boss under captions. For the final time, will you do the sign-off?
Oh, yes.
You can remember it. I know you're a bit scripted.
I'm going to freestyle it. Which camera am I looking at?
You're this one.
Oh, this one. I haven't looked at it at all.
No, you
whole episode. I've been ignoring eye contact. Yes, I've never had to do it from memory before, so I'm going to make it up. Thank you for listening to this potentially final ever episode of CorpusCast. As always, I've been your host, Dr. Robbie Love. And this episode has been produced and, actually hosted. I was the interviewee. I don't know why I called myself the host. I wasn't the host this time. It was hosted by Sam Cook, who I'm going to say, at least honorarily, has a PhD in corpus linguistics by now, because he's attended his 35 mandatory hours of learning modules over the last 3 years. Very grateful to him, as always. And thank you, our listeners, for, as always, listening and following the latest CorpusCast updates. You can, if you're not already, follow me on X. I'm also on Blue Sky now. You can follow me there at robbielove.org. And I guess don't bother letting us know what you thought of CorpusCast anymore, because it's kind of done for a while now anyway. But if you do, seriously though, if you do want to say anything, then do get in touch. But yes, thank you very much, and maybe see you again on the next episode of CorpusCast if there is one. Yeah, it sort of feels a bit strange to leave it at that, really. But I hope you don't hate me too much.
I don't hate you, no.
No, you get a bit more free time now. You get more time to...
Sometimes you know which podcast you were talking about earlier, so we'll have to just wrap it up there. But yes, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you the next time we see you.
Indeed. Thank you very much.